contacting the police every single day.
Landmark, Dylan Ween, defendant, before me, a notary public, 2729, Brown, Geraldine affiant, personality appeared, who being duty sworn alleges on information and belief, that in Charlotte County the state of Florida the defendant Landmark, Dylan Etienne did commit the offense, listed to wit. 784.0413, felony battery or domestic battery by strangulation, Lef F Deg T 6279. AKAKC warrant number, 2307-010680. Arrest date time, 071201232343. Arrest location, 7171 Utilities Road, Punta Gorda, Florida, 33982. Related OCA/case numbers. Probable cause for this arrest is as follows. On July 20, 2023, as the Charlotte County Domestic Violence Investigator, I conducted a follow-up regarding an incident involving the victim who will be referred to Landmark. Done this investigation, the victim disclosed a battery that took place in Charlotte County, Florida. I met with the victim, who provided a sworn recorded statement of the following information. The victim said the first significant incident she recalls was a verbal and physical altercation, which occurred in Sarasota County, Case 5-2023-00001850. The victim reported another incident that occurred around February 16, 2023, after they got into a verbal argument which escalated to a physical altercation. Dylan straddled her while she was lying on the ground. He began to hit her face with an open and closed hand. Dylan then grabbed her head and slammed her head onto the floor, causing lacerations and significant bleeding. After the altercation, they went to bed, where her head continued to bleed onto a pillow. The victim said she still had the pillow with blood hidden in the back of the closet within the residence. The victim stated sometime in early June of 2023, she and Dylan were arguing. The victim said Dylan began physically strangling her as he slammed her back against the towel rack on the wall. The victim's breathing became labored and challenging to the point that after he removed his hand from her neck, she was lightheaded, indicating that her airway was blocked. The victim sustained abrasions and bruising on both sides of her upper back. On July 10, 2023, the victim stated she and Dylan were in a verbal argument at some point during the disagreement. Dylan pushed the victim onto a bed inside the room, straddled her while he placed his hand over her nose and mouth. The victim was unable to scream for help. As the victim attempted to escape, Dylan kneed her on the left side of her rib cage, causing injury. Later that same day, the victim went to Fawcett Hospital in Port Charlotte to have her injuries examined. Once the injuries were examined, the doctor's determination was rib contusions or minor fractures. The victim stated the doctor explained to her she had a healed rib fracture, which the victim believes to be from the incident that occurred in February. Photos and messages about these domestic injuries were sent by the victim to a witness, identified as a Charlotte County fire personnel. Witness on file was located and provided a sworn recorded statement that he has received numerous text messages and photos from the victim over the last several months that have documented the injuries, and accounts of what happens showed these messages to detectives, which corroborate the victim's statement. The photos and messages were collected as evidence. I met with Dylan Landmark at the District 4 office. Post Miranda, Dylan admitted to having an anger problem that had led him to kick the bathroom door in during an argument with the victim. Dylan stated that he has a history of alcohol abuse, leading him to do things he does not remember. Dylan said Dylan was asked about statements made by the victim regarding the abuse. Dylan stated that the victim was truthful, and if she said it happened, then it must have happened. When Dylan was asked directly about each incident alleged by the victim, he was given the option of answering it was not possible or I don't remember. In each instance, Dylan answered that he doesn't remember the details of each incident. Dylan acknowledged being confronted by the victim on numerous occasions regarding her injuries. Reference the incident on July 10, 2023. Dylan admitted to being in the home when the victim sustained the rib injury. Although Dylan was present, he did not drive the victim to the hospital following the rib injury, despite obvious and intense pain. Still, he did admit to being in communication via phone with her at the hospital and requesting updates. During the interview, Dylan was breathing heavily and appeared nervous. At the end of the first interview, Sergeant Ulrich and Detective J. Resty met with Dylan to ask questions of their own. During this portion of the interview, Dylan referenced the past incident in the vehicle with the victim. Dylan described being extremely intoxicated during the event and he could not remember additional details. Sergeant Ulrich asked Dylan if the victim was a liar. Dylan replied, "Not that I'm aware of." Sergeant Ulrich revisited the incident where the victim sustained injury to her ribs. When asked if he caused the injury to her ribs, he said he could not remember. Sergeant Ulrich asked Dylan if it was possible that he caused injury to her ribs and he replied, "Probably." Throughout the interview, Dylan denied any direct knowledge of how the victim sustained her injuries during each event. However, he said there is no reason not to believe her. Dylan also said that when he drinks, he typically drinks to the point of blacking out. When asked, Dylan said it is possible that he was blackout drunk during the events where he injured the victim. When asked, Dylan agreed that he should be held accountable for his actions, even though he could not remember what happened. During the interview, Dylan agreed that he needs help and it's probable that he suffers from alcoholism. Sergeant Ulrich asked Dylan if he gets violent when he drinks. He could be either violently rageful or a happy person. Sergeant Ulrich asked Dylan if the victim ever confronted him about her injuries after the incident occurred. Dylan said that has happened and she made it known that he caused the injury. Dylan said the victim confronted him about the injury to her head and told him that he did it to her. Dylan said he responded to the victim by saying, "I'm sorry and I should not drink as much as I do." Sergeant Ulrich described an occasion where the victim told Dylan she was going to call the cops, and he replied, "Call the cops because I need help." When asked, Dylan acknowledged that he probably said that to the victim. Ultimately, Dylan said it is probable that the victim showed him each injury, after each event occurred, and told him he caused the injuries. However, he could not recall the conversations because he was blacked out. Based on the totality of the circumstances. Sworn recorded statements. Witness statements and evidence obtained, photos and hospital documents supporting the rib fracture injuries reported by the victim and Dylan residing as a family in the same household since January 2023. I find probable cause exists for the arrest of Dylan Landmark for violation of F.S.S 784.041, 3, domestic battery by strangulation, because he knowingly, intentionally, and against the victim's will, impeded her normal breathing or circulation of the blood so as to create a risk of or cause great bodily harm by applying pressure on the throat or neck of the other person.